Hey there, YouTube! Welcome on back to Artichoke Dip. My name is Rob, solo tabletop gamer. And in this video, I want to talk about the affliction. The affliction of which I have. Alright, but before we get into the video, a couple of words I want to say first. First thing is, secret to happiness, happy life, great gaming, is caffeination. Second thing is, if you liked the video, please click the like button, and if you haven't subscribed, click the subscribe button followed by the bell icon. Every time I upload a new video, you'll get a notification so you don't miss one. So here we are, marching rapidly towards the end of the year, and I think for everybody this year has just been a bad year. Doesn't matter where you're at on the globe, you've been affected one way or the other. And but there was one silver lining I have to say about it. So what I look forward to this time of year is the holidays, and as we get closer to the end of fall, we get Black Friday and we get Cyber Monday. And for me, that's typically when I look for the good deals to make a decent purchase and get it at a reasonable price. Now, with that being said, and I know I made a declaration that I was going to slow down on the purchasing of games and stuff like that, but well, when I really evaluate, I guess you could say my addiction. I guess I'm addicted to games. I mean, I guess it's not all that bad. So, but with that being said, let's talk more about the affliction. Now, as I was looking around and looking at different games, a name came up, a name I recognize and I'm a fan of, that being Ed Greenwood. Ed Greenwood was a and how do I put this? I rank him up there with Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson and a couple of other contributors to our hobby, and Kevin Sambita, and the list goes on as to the people who have contributed to our hobby of what we love. But the one thing I can say is Ed Greenwood has always really captivated my imagination, and some of the best stuff that man, I can remember, such as this. So when I seen this name, and this is old school D&D right here. This is where I live. This is what I love right here. But the fact that his name was attached to this game really intrigued me, and I knew it was going to be good. So what I have been looking at lately, because I've been doing some playthroughs, recording some of my play sessions and putting them out there, and I decided, I haven't done a video like this in a while. I haven't really talked about some game systems, what I like about them, comparing them, why they're great solo, what you get for what you pay for, basically. And I think with this game I'm going to get into and talk about, I think a lot of you out there will be very surprised, and maybe it's one you want to add to your library, or perhaps you stumbled upon my channel because you're looking to get into tabletop gaming, maybe disconnecting from electronic and wanting to find something that's grounded here in the here and now, and or for the fact that I just heard a study recently that they said because of this pandemic that a lot of people have been really getting into Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, because obviously it's the largest, most successful RPG game, blah blah blah. Is it the best? That's that goes back to the old saying, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. We'll just leave it there. So, but this game, when I saw it, And I was surprised I haven't heard about it until recently. And let's take a look. I've been talking this game, but what game are you talking about, Artichoke? Folklore. The Affliction. So, I have a huge amount of RPG games, and I like miniature games, but I really like board games that incorporate miniatures and have miniature skirmish and stuff that I know I'm being affected by it right now, as a lot of people are right now, and they call it pandemic fatigue, to where, you come home from work or whatever you're doing, and you just really don't have that energy, will, or drive to really do much of anything. I think some of that is just burnout. And what I mean by that is, even if you're into electronic gaming, and I'm going to use Skyrim as an example, and you've played Skyrim. At first, Skyrim is an excellent game. It's great. It's this vast world. You're upgrading your character. You're doing all these wonderful things. But then after a while, you kind of get burned out. You kind of want something different. And I think that's kind of what I'm experiencing. So I've been looking for some interesting board games that I can incorporate into my library, that I can pull out and help shake things up a bit, if you will. And this game right here is good. It's really good. So let's talk about what Folklore is, and I think you may be surprised. So, Folklore is a board game, but it's also an RPG game, and it also has aspects of a miniature skirmish game. Intrigued yet? We're going to get into that a little bit more, and we're going to take a look at the table, and I'm going to explain a few things to you so you can see how the game flow works, and why I fell in love with this game so quickly as I did. Get a swig of coffee there. So, this one came out in 2018, and there are currently 2 editions floating around out there in the market. This is the second edition, which comes with cardboard standees. The first edition came with actual 28mm miniatures, and it's considerably more expensive. But the miniatures, well, let's just say I have miniatures, and I don't think I need, to me, the amount of miniatures that you got just didn't, in my opinion, justify the dollar amount. And I get it, when you purchase that, there's a lot of money, resources, and time that go into miniatures. They got to pay the artists that actually come up with the idea, then the sculptors to sculpt them, then they got to go to mold, and then you have the manufacturing process and packaging and all that before that end result is finally delivered to us for us to enjoy. So I get that aspect of it, but when you have the vast amount of miniatures that I have, it's kind of like, why? So I decided I really wanted the game. I really wasn't too interested in miniatures, so to speak. I wanted the game. So I opted with the second edition of Folklore that comes in at about $52. And before you say anything, let's go to the table. Let's take a look at this, and I'm going to talk a little bit more and demonstrate what it is and what it isn't. And I'll ultimately, at the end of the video, give my rating of what I think about this game and why I did that. Alright, my friends, let's move on to the table, shall we? So let's take the first look at the first thing you learn about this game, and which is the board. Now, I think a lot of people are going to say at first glance, this is basically Gloomhaven. No, it really is not Gloomhaven. Gloomhaven is Gloomhaven. Now, I have to admit, at first, I enjoyed Gloomhaven, first couple of scenarios that I went through, but I found as time went on, setup, teardown time, and on top of that, the cards. After a while, the encounters would become rather almost predictable, if you will, with the way that the cards were in the decks. Now, some people may argue that with me, but as I said in the past, I've never been a real big card fan, if you will. Cards have always just kind of, I don't know. To me, I always want to leave it down to the way that I really enjoy to do it. And the way that I enjoy to play the game is the way that this game has been designed to play, and that is with the luck of the die. So let's get a little bit more into Folklore the Affliction and find out what this game has to offer and if it's right for you in your game table. So, first thing I want to talk about with this game that I had noticed that I really, really did enjoy, and I wish more game publishers out there would do their rule sets like this, because really, honestly, a lot of games you have to pick up this rule book and you have to read from the front all the way to the back, and then by the time you get to the back and you go to start playing, you've forgotten a lot of the rules that you read in the beginning, only to find you're referencing back, and your first couple of game sessions you're sitting there in a state of confusion thinking to yourself, what the hell am I doing? Whereas with this game, doesn't do that. This is the beauty of this game. Yes, in effect, as you look, you see a board, and you may think it's just in fact a board game, which it's not. It's actually an RPG game, and it's an RPG game that can be played solo or with a group, which is very cool. But the rule book, what I love about it, is from the minute that you open the rule book up, it is extremely user-friendly. It gives you a quick game overview, what to expect from the game, and then at that point, the game setup, it explains that to you. As you read through, which are in rules are very simple to understand, but it gets you into the game immediately. So you're learning the rules as you're playing the game. And it introduces the rules slowly as the story progresses. But I'm going to be honest with you. If you've played RPG games or miniature skirmish games, you already are going to know about 60% of the rules in this book, just from previous experience of role-playing games. But if you stumbled across my channel, you're just now getting into the solo RPG, or maybe you're exploring the RPG hobby for something to do during the pandemic as a hobby, you don't know where to start. This is a good place for that. The fact that this teaches you how to play an RPG, but in fact it is a board game, but it's an RPG game, and it teaches you those necessary rule sets that you need to understand to be able to play RPGs and or miniatures. If you're going to use miniatures in your RPG game, it's going to explain those as well, which is awesome. So let's talk about the first thing you learn about, which is this right here, the board. So if you take a look at the board, and it has over here your legend that explains to you, these are your roads, these segmented areas, Obviously, it's hard for you to see on here, but there are rivers that are running through here that obviously cause, you can see right here, I guess you can't see it. This is your river, you got your bridges right there. The solid gray lines, as you see here, are area borders, and then these red lines mean there's no passage, that you are unable to get into those areas by just normal travel, if you will. But as you start out, you are allotted so many movement points by what they call stride on your character sheet, which we'll get into here in a minute. As your characters move along these segments and the stride is counted, once the movement has ended, it's at that point, if you're on the road, that you're going to draw a road card event. And I know some of you are going to be like, hey, wait a minute, this is just like Skyrim. I mean, not Skyrim, Gloomhaven. Well, yeah, it's similar. And then you're going to draw the card and you're going to read it. Now, there's two different, as you can see, options here on this card, which I'm going to explain. So, let's say, like with me, I'm playing solo, I'm playing with two characters. I have two characters on the board, and they have just reached the end of their first movement. Now, you start out in the game deciding who you want the leader to be of your group, and that stays permanent throughout the entire storyline. So let's say we started out with this guy, he moved there, he stopped. Now it's going to be his turn to continue the trip moving through this board. At that point, you're going to keep track with this. This is going to show the daytime and the nighttime, which switches off. So we left here, which was daytime, but now it's his time to move, and at that point it would be flipped to the night. At the end of his movement, we get to here, we go back to that card, and then as you notice, there's two different colors here. This is the nighttime and this is the daytime. You're going to read that card and you're going to resolve what that card tells you to do, whether it's a skill check, it's a combat, completing a small errand, if you will, for an NPC, what have you. You resolve the card. Now, if at any time you decide you wanted to take a shortcut and go off the road cross country, at that point you would then refer to this deck for your off-road events, which happen to be a whole lot harder and pose more challenges to the game, which is very interesting. It's my first talking point I'm going to talk about with this. So even though the way that the game plays, you're going to start out here at the Church of the Crossroads and you're going to move across the board, what changes is the decisions you make, how to get there, the encounters you encounter along the way, whether you succeed and or fail, which will greatly change the story every time you play. So every time you sit down to play this game, it's going to be a different story every single time. The main story will stay the same as the way it is printed in your story journal book, but your decisions are ultimately going to change the final outcome of that game. So as you play the game, this is the first thing you are introduced to and you are shown. Moving on from there, the second thing that they teach you, which I love about this game system, you learn as you play. Not like a lot of games. Read, then go and apply that to the game, only to go back and to read some more. which I think chases a lot of people off from a lot of larger games like this for that. Um, you know, you kind of know you're in for a daunting task when you get a board game, and it suggests that you go to this link on YouTube and watch a 2-hour tutorial how to set it up and how to play it. This game, you're not going to have that. So, very user friendly, very, very cool game indeed. And I really like how that plays out and how they do that. So, let's talk about, at this point, choosing your character and what they offer. So, in this system, in this set, you get 5 characters you can choose from. And you're not really limited. I mean, you have 5 characters. It's what you get to begin with. And depending on how many people are playing, so if you're playing solo, they recommend 2 characters. If you're playing in a group, you can play all 6 characters at once. The characters that they offer you in this set is the Exorcist, the Witch Hunter, the Arcanist, the Archaeologist, Avenging Madman, and the Telepath. Now you can, kind of, if you look at it, you can see how this is going versus just by the title that they gave him. The Telepath, obviously, she's going to use psychic powers, and that's going to be what propels her forward. And encounters and skills and so on and so forth. So if you wanted to play a psychic character, you could. The Avenging Madman is just what it says. He's a brawler, melee combatant, and basically he's avenging the death of his wife and his daughter and looking for answers. The Archaeologist is an explorer and a scholar focused on the ancient and the unexplained. So he's constantly exploring and looking for answers to explain what's going on in this world. Why is all this darkness of vampires and ghosts and demons and werewolves and all this other stuff? The Arcanist. So this is unique. I like the story background, how they did this. It's kind of a wink back to oh my gosh, I can't believe I forgot his name. I cannot believe it. But it's a kind of a nod towards Lovecraft. There we go. H.P. Lovecraft, and the fact that the Arcanist seeks hidden knowledge and mastery of secrets of the universe. She's a student of ancient systems of numerology and chakra mysticism. She found a torn piece of parchment from the pages of a much larger book known as the Necronomicon, and the Arcanist seeks to find the remainder of this book to learn all of its secrets. Then, of course, you get to the Witch Hunter. The Witch Hunter is just that. He's a fanatical bounty hunter who adheres to a strict code of honor and is sworn to purge the world of evil. And that is the leader of my group. And the Exorcist. The Exorcist is a priest of sound mind and body whose training and purpose are to seek out those evil forces and beings that wreak havoc on our world. So, loose interpretation, he's basically a cleric, if you will, if you were to compare him to a D&D type of setting or RPG setting. But I decided for my game, I wanted to go with the good guys are going to try to rid the world of the evil peril in which at that point floods and has decimated this area or this world, known as the affliction. So the first thing you do is you choose your character sheet, which is this right here, which is kind of cool. It's up to you to give them a name, and you get to choose a character focus on the front, which allows you to, at that point, be able to detail your character to the way that you want to do it. Now you're given a few options to choose from, but nevertheless, you do get the option to choose. When you open it up, it's going to show you your starting equipment, some tokens that you're going to get, the weapon you're going to get. And also inside it shows you a location extra. So each character, when they go to a location, such as these pointed out on the map, at that point when you reach there are certain services that you can pay for, such as going to the inn, a chapel, visiting the market, seeing a physician, visiting the tinker, going to the stables, so on and so forth, which are outlined on this card right here. But not all characters have access to everything that these areas offer, whereas with this character, when you get to these locations, you have certain things that you have access to that other characters may not, that you can spend your coins on to be able to purchase to upgrade your character, which is really cool. That's a it's board game-ish, but it's also very RPG as well, in the fact that unlike a lot of board games where you're just constantly drawing off of a deck and adding more cards into your card pool, with this you have to gain coin by completing quests, passing skill checks, encounters, so on and so forth, to be able to get the money to be able to afford these things, which drives the story forward like an RPG to keep going. So once you have decided on the character sheet you want, it's at that point you're going to pull your character card. Your character card's going to outline up here their abilities, and then down here their skills. So let's talk about this. It's very basic and very simple to understand when you get into the card. So when you look up here, you have your Vita, which is your health, your hit points, however you want to relate to that. It's basically all the same thing. This would be, if you're playing D&D, those would be your hit points. You got 21 Vita. This is your defense, 38. Your might, which is a +4. So when you roll your dice in an encounter, you can add that to your final dice roll, plus any weapons that you have and bonuses that it'll give you all tally up in the end. Then comes your damage bonus. Your damage bonus is just in fact that. After you roll your weapon's damage, you're going to add the bonus to that. You have power points as well. I'm going to talk about power points here in a moment. And then stride. Stride is in fact your movement. So regardless if you are moving your character on the board here, or you're actually doing a encounter where you're using your standees and or your miniatures to complete that encounter on a terrain tile, it does not change. So 4 squares here, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 4 segments here. It remains the same. Now when it comes to skills, each character at that point is given a bonus in a certain skill set, such as my witch hunter, it gets a +1 to faith, a +2 to nerve, and a +1 to occult. Now those are not all the skills. There are quite a few skills in the game system. Those skills would be archaeology, awareness, ecology, faith, nerve, occult, speech, and trickery. Now, just because your character does not have a skill here on the character sheet does not mean that they cannot roll. As a matter of fact, they can roll to see if they succeed or fail at that skill. This just gives them a bonus to that particular skill, giving them an advantage over other characters and encounters to be able to, at that point, achieve that skill check. RPG looking, isn't it? Then, of course, you got your starting equipment. You have your mystic knowledge, which is prayers for him. And then they all have a special ability. Each character is unique with their special ability. My character here, the witch hunter, he has fearless. You have encountered danger that would make most mortals lose their sanity. You can never be spooked. So that's cool. He's immune to spooked, which is a condition in this game system. And then keywords, hunt, martial, military. So with that, how the game flow works. You have a series of skill checks. You're able to search for items and treasure. You engage in combat and encounters. And ultimately, this, however the dice roll and the decisions that you make will depict how the story changes and how the story flows for you. Now, like I said, you could play through this several times and have a different outcome every time. And the driving force behind that is this right here, your story journal. So as you move through the story, it shows you how to set up the tiles for the encounters. And as you move through, and you complete your quest, at that point, you're going to have a path as to what you choose. Now, depending on how you choose to go ahead with that path, you'd go to the back of the book, and at that point, by the page and the numbered heading, you would read it, and at that point, it's going to forward the story in that direction, which is going to take you either to another location, it's going to take you to another skill check, it's going to take you to another encounter. You just don't know what it's going to do. And ultimately, when you get done with that, which is going to lead to another, which will lead to another, which, just like an RPG game, is a series of dice rolls, decisions that alter how the game flows and goes. And this game is no different. That's why I said this is a board game. And if you look at the things that you get to play the game, yeah, in fact, it's a board game. I mean, you don't have your shortage of tokens. They give you a lot of tokens to play. And then, of course, there's the cards that you get. All the cards, and more cards, and more cards, and more cards. May look daunting, but let's progress a little bit further and talk about the way that you can play the game and the options that you're given to play it. So the game is set up one of two ways. If you want to play it like a board game and use your tokens and everything like that, you can. Each character template, as you can see here, is laid out. If you look at this arrow, it has this Vita tracker here, and it has your PowerPoint and your Ghost tracker over here, and you can use these tiles, is to which are numbered, to keep track of your Vita points and so on and so forth, like a board game if you wanted to do that. What they suggest in the rules, and I found myself doing, and it really does streamline the game, make the game more enjoyable and easier to manage, is either get yourself a piece of notebook paper and write down all your character information, items in which you have acquired, conditions in which are currently affecting your character, special abilities they may have, keep track of your Vita, your defense as you get armor, so on and so forth as you go along like an RPG game. Now, in the back of the rule book, they do give you a template as to which you can either photocopy, or I would imagine if you go to their website, they would probably have a free download, I am guessing, which is a template they give you for a character sheet, and how they recommend that they would keep track of all your characters' information on there. The nice thing about it is, by doing it that way, you don't have to hold on to all of these tokens. You can just write down what you have. If you have, for instance, like a bandage token like this right here, and on the back it'll tell you it recovers 4 points of health or 4 Vita. You could just simply write that on your inventory that you have bandages recover 4 health, and once you use it, you can just erase it off your item list and you no longer have it in your inventory. And if you wanted to get more, you would have to purchase more at a town or with a local traveling merchant that you may run across on the roadway and be able to trade with them to get it. So there's a lot of decisions you have with this game depending on how you want to play it. If you want to play it like a board game or you want to play it like an RPG game, it's ultimately up to you and how you want to run it. Me, I run it like an RPG game, and that's the way that I do it. Now, as you progress through the world and through the encounters, you will be, at that point, face some very fearsome encounters along the way. There's 2 different encounters in this world. There are one, which are skirmishes. Skirmishes, you don't put a tile out like this, and you don't have miniatures, nothing like that. All the rolls are done on the dice, and everything is done with a series of dice rolls, and depending if you succeed and or fail will determine the story flow and the outcome for the story to move in that direction. The other ones are encounters, which you would put out your encounter tile, your standees and or miniatures, and you would proceed with the encounter that way. There is a couple of differences between that as well. When you get your character, as you will notice, they start out with some starting ability cards, as you can see here, and they have a point cost associated to them. These cards cannot be used in a skirmish, but in an encounter they can, such as this guy from my Witch Hunter. Gain +5 might with a ranged weapon during the first round of combat. Well, that's worth doing it, particularly if you have a enemy that has a very high defense. Every little bit counts. Now, it may look cool on the outside, you look at the cards and some of the abilities you get, but going back to the character sheet and looking at the character sheet, you only have so many power points you can expend. After you expend those power points, it is at that point you have to rest to recover. The only places you can find to really rest and fully recover are in these cities and inns, or through other characters that can help you recover health. But when it comes to power points, you actually have to rest, which poses more, how shall we put this, it really makes the game interesting and like an RPG, for the fact that along the way you can't just say, oh, I'm going to rest here and I'm going to regain everything and I'm just going to keep moving and keep moving and keep moving on. Nope, doesn't work that way. So you really have to look at your inventory, you have to look at your resources, and you really have to make decisions like RPG game in order to well, hopefully survive that next encounter and have enough of your available resources to make it through. So that's the cool part of it. When you move on to the encounters, so the encounter cards, and the cool thing about how this is set up is it does teach you the basics of skirmish, miniature skirmish. I really like that. So this is a game that both the beginner and or the veteran that's been playing for a while can really enjoy and get a lot out of. And if you're new into this hobby and you've never played miniature skirmish before, you're going to get an introduction as to what miniature skirmish is. And let's get into that a little bit. So on your story-based cards, you're going to have one side that is skirmish. So when you go through your skirmish, you would look at how many people are in your party. If you're a solo player, you're going to have 2 characters. And at that point, I'm going to explain what these dice are for here in a minute. If you had 7 characters in your party, you would at that point use a 6-sider. And if you had 5, oh, I'm sorry, I read that wrong. If you had 3 or 4 characters in your party, not 7, you would use the 6-sider. If you had 5 characters in your party, you would use these 2 4-siders together. Now, this is how this works out, which makes it really, really simple to understand for both skirmish and encounters. So let's say, for an example, here's our tile, here's our characters, and here is the werewolf. Now, it's the werewolf's turn to attack, but he can only make one attack. Who is he going to attack? Him or him? Well, for a lot of games, you could say, well, the one with the most experience, or the one with the most health, or the one with the most items, or the one, so on and so forth, which, when you play solo after a while, that can get kind of cumbersome in keeping track of all that. This is very simple. So taking the 4-sided die, a 1 through a 2 would be my leader. A 3 through a 4 rolled would be him. So you'd simply roll that. It's a 4. The werewolf at that point would move up here and begin his attack on that character. So that's how them dice come into play. If at that point the encounter is successful at attacking your character, you would at that point just read the box over here. It's going to tell you what damage they do, and you would take that damage and move on. Now, moving on, I'm going to flip it over to the encounter side so we can look a little bit more. So with the encounter, you're going to have the Vita with an encounter, because there's 2 sides to these cards. You got a skirmish side, which is just a fixed value of damage that all characters could receive through a skirmish, or an encounter side. When you get to the encounter side, things get a little bit more dicey and they do get more powerful. So if you have 2 characters, the Vita is 12. If you had 3, their Vita goes up to 16. 4 is 20, and then 5 would be 24. And if you look down here, you have might. Might corresponds with the Vita. So if you had 2 characters at that point, their might would be a +0. If you had 3, it would be a +5. So they would roll their attack roll and they would add 5 to that. And they would move on to midnight. If you had 4, they would add 10 to that roll. And then a nightmare encounter, which would be a +15 to the roll. Very cool how it balances it out and how it does that. Now the difference is, here is their defense score. It takes a 38 to hit them, and their stride is a 5, or their movement is 5. And then below that, which I'll get to in a moment, is their lore and or their coins. Now besides that, they do have special powers. This creature is a swarm. The bats Swarm Vita represents the number of bats contained within it. For every 4 bats, add +1 damage to their attacks. So as you can see how the encounters can get pretty rude pretty fast. But let's get into damage, taking damage, and how the characters do it and how the encounters do it. So with the encounters, if they roll their percentage die and your character in fact has taken damage, at that point you would come over here to this column. You would roll the red 10-sider and you would correspond that with the number. So you look here at the number 1 through 4, Swarm. You are bit and clawed with a torrent of wings. Lose 1d4 Vita. So you're going to roll a 1d4 and you're going to record that against your character as Vita loss. When it comes to your characters, the same applies, but there's a little bit of a difference how that works. And I'm going to show you what I mean by that. So with my Witch Hunter here, as I talked about, you have these abilities in which you can at that point spend a power point, activate this ability. But on top of that, after you roll your percentage die and add in any of your bonuses that you may have through equipment and or anything else you may have picked up along the way, you would at that point, if you're successful, go to the damage roll. All characters, unless otherwise specified, roll a 1d4. You'd roll the 4, and as you can see here on his card, he gets a +1 to this weapon automatically. So I rolled a 2, he would get a 3, and then he would add his damage bonus into that as well, a 2, which would give him a total of 5. So the encounter would take 5 points of damage. Now, that will go back and forth through the encounter. The encounters, how they are dealt with, they do use, which I guess you would consider an initiative, if you know what I mean by initiative round. And the initiative would be you would take 2 10-siders, one representing the encounter, the other one representing the leader of your party. They'd be rolled. The highest roll at that point takes the first turn. So as this, I rolled an 8. So my leader would take the first attack, followed by this character, and then it would go over to the enemy side, and then that would just keep cycling like that throughout. Now, pretty much when it comes to that, that's the miniature skirmish side of it. And the other thing I have to cover is right here, your lore and your coins. So every time you defeat a encounter or skirmish, you will get, in a skirmish you'll receive coins. On an encounter you'll receive lore. Now lore is experience. As you gain lore and you advance, you look at your character sheet, and as you go through your lore tree, as you can see back here, you can buy at that point skills. You can update your skills, you can update your abilities, and there is a lot that you can do to customize your character the way you want it. Through your entire skill tree, you are given 2 choices for each amount of lore that you acquire to be able to update your character and flesh them out even more to the way that you want to play that character, which gives you the RPG aspect of that. Now, of course, like miniature skirmish, which I enjoy, and they take account for, now they're going to give you standees, and they're going to give you these tiles, which are also reversible. If you look at the back side of the tile. Each one has a different printing on it for a different encounter in the storybook itself. For me, I want to step further, and because I really do enjoy my terrains and my miniatures, and at that point I added my 3D representations with these headstones for the cemetery encounter. Set it up as so. And just to make it official, I went boom, put the gate in, and really made it a cool encounter for my characters to play in. Like that. So last night when I set this up and I was playing through it, this is the way my encounter was set up. But the cool thing I liked about it is the fact that they also take into account on the miniature aspect of the game is if you do have a ranged opponent and or your character, like my guy here is ranged, he has to be able to see his target in order to attack him. He can't just fire through this headstone and hit him. He would at that point have to move to be able to get a clear line of sight to be able to fire onto him. As well as when it comes to movement, you can move freely through your companion spot, but you can't move freely through an enemy's spot. Now there's more rules that comes to occupying and pushing a character and so on and so forth in the advanced rules section. I'm not going to really get into that a whole lot. I'm just going over the basics, but this just teaches you the basics of miniature skirmish, how the terrain affects the tile, and how your characters interact with that, which makes it a more dynamic playing experience. So I really do enjoy that aspect of this game, that they do that. So you're learning how to play miniature skirmish, you're learning an RPG game, and you're getting everything you need in this box to be able to do it. Now, like I said, I have played RPGs and miniatures for quite a long time, so a lot of my props and stuff that I have here, don't think you get these out of the game box, because in fact you do not. With that being said, now to put it in a nutshell, this is folklore, and on top of the miniature aspect of it, the role-playing game aspect of it, the whole entire idea that everything comes down to the luck of the die, you also have other areas of the game that add a little bit more detail and some things into it. The fact that you are able to acquire animal companions or familiars, just like the snow owl, which give you a +1 to awareness and +1 to damage to ranged attacks if you had him attached to your character. Or as you go through the world, you meet different NPCs. I call them NPCs, they call them companion militia, that you can at that point attach to your character card. I'll give you an example here, just like this vagabond right here. He adds a +1 trickery skill check to your character, and gets +1 coin at the end of every combat. So you gain them bonuses by having these NPCs attached to your characters. Now, of course, there's a limit to that. You're only allowed to have 2 NPCs attached per character. If in the story event, all your characters at that point already have the max allowed value of NPCs attached to them, which is 2 each, At that point, you can take that card, discard it, and take 15 coins in place of it. Now, on top of that, you have an infinite amount of abilities. You can update on your characters as you go along. You have a large amount of items as to which you're going to find throughout the world, in the towns, at the markets, and what you're just going to find as you go along the way. You are also going to have rituals as well. So as you draw the ritual cards and you execute those, the Cloak of the Wind, the power of the four winds fuel your movement. All characters become swift. And you would look at that condition. So pretty much in a nutshell, that is folklore. That's what I like about this game. It's a cool game. It's a RPG, all in a little nice little box. But you don't have to play it like a board game. You can play it just like an RPG, set it up on your table and use it that way, and put all your tokens and stuff and leave them in the box, or drag them out and use them if you want to, like a board game. Entirely 100% up to you and how you want to play it. And like I said, as you go through the game, they teach you the rule sets as you move along. But the other cool thing that they do for you is they also give you these nice quick reference cards as you move through, like resting, adventuring. It explains to you what you can do, your characters can do when they're out and adventuring. Skirmishing gives you a quick checklist, so you don't have to go back to the rule book. You can just refer to this quickly and you can have them right there for you. Encounters, characters, and ghosts, which I'm going to talk about here in a minute because I haven't actually done that yet in this game. Encounters, creatures, and afflictions. Status positive and then status negative. So let me talk about this right here real quick. Afflictions. So anytime you run the possibility in an encounter, for example, if you were attacked by a werewolf and you fail that save check, you can become afflicted. Afflicted would mean you would be lycanthropic, which means you would have to roll a resist the occult skill check in order to save. If you failed, you would have a +1 to damage, +1 to strive, receive half of coin reward, receive an extra attack during encounters. Your claw would be 1d4 damage. If a moon icon appears, roll a d10, 1 through 9, skirmish with the group with a skirmish counter of 1. On 0, become a werewolf and skirmish to the death. So as you can see, as you move through the world and you are afflicted by these different things. So there's bloodlust, there's cursed, there's deranged, there's fractured, there's immobilized, lycanthropic, possessed, sickened, spooked, and then transformed. All is, and now it's not without positive afflictions as well. Some of the positive afflictions you get are blessed, braved, ethereal, faithful, favored, fortified, lucky, perceptive, respected, and swift. So it's all balanced out. You have good and you have bad. Now the last thing I'm going to talk about is, which is unique about this game. It's not the first game I've seen do this. Swords and Sorcery does a similar thing. But it is kind of unique. It's something you can play around with. And that is the whole mindset. When your character falls in battle and dies, that's not the end of the story for your character. But at that point, you would flip it over and you would play a ghost. Now, my characters have not died yet, so I have not played a ghost at this point. So I'm not going to really elaborate on a whole lot of the ghost rule sets here at this point. as if I have, because I haven't. But as you can see, you're no longer going to have access to the attribute cards like you would when your character's alive, but you have ghost points. You got 10 ghost points in which you can use these abilities over here. Your defense is a 42. You have a +6 to your might. Your damage bonus is a +3. And you have a +5 movement and or stride when you're in ghost form. So that's a unique thing right there to be able to look at. All right, let's move on. There you have it, my friends. It's Folklore, the Affliction in a box. Now, on top of that, I love this game so much. I got into it, started playing it, and I found out within the first couple of game sessions, I really do like it. I really do enjoy it. And I decided to pick up the expansion to it as well. Now, the expansion, which is Dark Tales right here, what it gives you is a whole lot more characters as to what you can choose from. So you have way more characters you can really customize your party group with. You get the courtesan, which is like a rogue, an illusionist, a scientist, which a scientist uses vials of acid and science, if you will, to defeat their foes. A slayer, which is more like a fighter. You also have the butcher. You have a woodsman, and the woodsman, I would think the woodsman would be like based on a ranger, and I'm trying to draw similarities between D&D here, so people out there will understand. Basically, classes is, if you will, is basically what that is. It's telling you the character classes you can play. Now, of course, all characters are human. There's no sub races in these to where you're not going to play like a half orc or something like that. You're going to play a human. But even with that aside, it's still a cool game. But the reason why I got the expansion was for the fact to get more characters, but on top of that, you also get this huge storybook as well. So this is just another story journal as to what you can go through and have a whole lot more encounters. You get more terrain tiles with it, and you know, endless hours of RPG fun here is what this is. Now, when I said in the beginning of the video I was going to rate this game and talk about it, and I don't really, I did that for a while, and I guess let me explain how I'm going to rate it and why I'm going to rate it this way. So if there was a scale 1 to 10, where would this game fall in on the scale 1 to 10? I would put it an 8. And the reason why I would give it an 8, or even pushing up towards a 9, is for a couple of reasons. One, this is a great introduction system for anybody looking to get into the hobby, right? So you're going to learn the basics of miniature skirmish, you're going to learn the basics of RPG, and the dice rolls, using skill checks, your combat, using, on top of that, making a decision for the story, whether it be for the better and or the worst, and having to play out those consequences in the world and overcome those. On top of that, you have your limited amount of resources into which you have to operate within to be able to, you know, jump that next hurdle in the story. So that part of it is awesome. It teaches people who have never played a tabletop RPG how to do that, and gives them a little taste of miniature skirmish too. and how that operates, bringing everything in. It does the 3D representation of the game world right there. The other thing is it can be played solo, so you can pick this up and set it down and play an RPG, or if you want to play a solo cooperative board game style that's like a RPG, you can do that as well with all the tokens and the sheets, or you can just go straight to the other way, which is using your character sheet and keeping track of everything like you would in an old school RPG, which is what I like to do. It's really cool. It's simple. If you ask me, I really highly suggest, if you do pick up this game and do that, to yeah, I would look at doing it that way. It just makes it more simple. Everything is more streamlined, and it gives you more time to enjoy the game and less time fidgeting with cards and tokens and all this stuff on the board. But that's me. That's not you. So, all of that said, but the main driving factor is, if you look in comparison, if you were to get the main core player's handbook for 5th edition D&D, it's $49. So you're gonna basically, we'll say $50. Then you got to buy your dice, depending on where you get your dice from, and then moving on from there, if you want dungeon tiles or stuff like that, you got to buy those. Then you got to buy your miniatures. A lot of them, if you're going to do what a lot of people do, that you don't have the paints, because the paints are an extra added expense on top of that, and then taking the time to learn those techniques to be able to paint miniatures and how to paint miniatures in a very efficient way and make them look good. So that's a whole another ball of wax that you have to look at, where you don't have that with this. But for $52, you get a complete game system. You get standees, unless you decide to go with the miniatures and you pay an extra, the $100 and get the miniatures with it as well. You get a great story. You get a lot for your money, I guess I should say. And it's overall, I have to say, out of a lot of games, I wish a lot of game developers would do this. Would give me a game, have me open up the box, take my characters out, set the board up, turn to this page, and then as I'm reading and moving through, not only am I playing the game immediately, but I am also learning the rules of the game. So as the story progresses, I'm learning at the same time, which is great. And it really, really is an enjoyable experience. So that's why I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10 for the solo aspect, for what you get and everything like that. So, but those are my thoughts and not yours. And with that being said, I think this is where I'm going to leave the video off. Remember, my friends, secret to a happy gaming life is proper caffeination. And if you liked the video, please click the like button. And if you haven't subscribed, click the subscribe button, followed by the bell icon. Every time I upload a video, you'll get a notification so you won't miss one. Alright, my friends, this is Artichoke Dip. I think it's time to sign off.